Hi, welcome back to Infinigate TV. Again, we're here at the Black Hat event in Las Vegas 2014. And we have a special setting, and now we have some special invited guests joining us for a discussion on general topics and issues around information and IT security. Before we start, I would just do a quick introduction around the table. So we have from Sophos, we have James Lyne, who are the head of research. Is that correct?
Yeah, the global head of security research. It's a wonderfully grand title for big
good.
geek.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Then we have Paul Judge from Barracuda Networks.
Yes.
And if I'm not mistaken, you are the Vice President and Chief Research Officer for Barracuda Labs, yeah?
Yes, it is our version of a similar title for Big Geek.
Okay. That's perfect. I'm really excited to hear about what your excuse is. Here we have Kellman Meghu from Checkpoint, Head of Security Engineering, is what I'm told.
Yes, thank you.
Okay,
Very similar
perfect.
title.
Okay, good. Then we'll just kick it off. And James, I thought about starting with you. I'm going to throw you a rather big question. Might be hard to answer, but just give us your immediate insights on it. The threat landscape, as we see it right now. Just over the 2-3 last days, we have had 3 or 4 major happenings, big breaches.
Yeah.
Things are happening really fast now. The threat landscape has been changing rapidly and evolving over the last 10-15 years, as I've been in IT security. But I feel something is happening now, more dramatic than ever. But just to kick it off, it would be good to hear your comments on the threat landscape. What's in the mirror and what's ahead of us?
You literally couldn't have chosen a bigger question. But let me give this a go, and you guys chime in, disagree or agree. So over the last 10 years of playing with malicious code every day, I've definitely noticed an interesting set of trend changes. I remember going into work 6-7 years ago and seeing a couple of thousand pieces of malware a day and thinking, that's a lot of malware, how are we possibly going to deal with that huge volume of code? Where over the last couple of days we've been averaging between 250 and 300,000 pieces of new malware every single day after deduplication. Around 30,000 new infected websites, of which the grand majority are legitimate sites being compromised for purposes of said distribution. I think for me the most interesting thing in the last few months is some changes in the behavior of the overall hierarchy of cyber criminals, nation states, all these different actions. In the old days, you used to be able to look at malware and figure out from its payload, from what it did, from its intent, what the thing was about, and possibly come up with some form of affiliation or link it to a potential group of actors, if not attribute it to an individual. Now, everything looks the same. Like all of the malware looks identical, all very similar functionality, all changing in very, very similar ways, all highly commercialized, and a great deal of it being driven by these expansive crime packs that are on sale online. So I think this commercialization of cybercrime has led to every actor using very, very similar techniques. And to your point on the recent visibility, I'm not sure if that's another change in the scale of the attack, or whether actually, to be positive, for the first time ever in information security talk, it's never happened before, I think we might just be better at spotting the fact that we're getting screwed, and now it's on to doing something about it. I think it's the same stuff that was happening before, but people are actually realizing more, and the mainstream press is interested in reporting it, where previously it was banned to old corridors. So I have a lot that I could throw in on a technical level about what I think is going to happen in the next couple of years. I'm sure we'll come back to that later. But on a macro trend, that's certainly what I see at the moment.
Do you see any development with the nation states using, or you could say nation states or government using malware, like law enforcement, or several countries now have started. The US has been doing that for many years, but using malware to infect suspects of crime, using sort of legitimate malware.
The thing for me is, it's really difficult to attribute most stuff. And when you've got 300,000 pieces of malware, all you can hope to do is get on with trying to stop it and not really worry about
Where
who
it comes
necessarily
from, yeah.
generated it. But where you have those one-off occasions where you find something by motive, or someone comes forward and owns up to it at some point, when you look at that malware, it's not big and clever and unblockable. In many regards, it's often more stupid, more basic, simple tactics that we see the mainstream cybercriminals using.
Yeah.
And I think that really flies in the face of what most people would expect government malware to be. It takes advantage of the low yield of distribution. It's well tested against security products in advance. Its simplicity is actually its strength. So that's one of the few markers you might be able to say.
Except maybe Stuxnet. That was fairly complicated.
It was an impressive piece of development. Although we see plenty of pieces of malicious code, toolkits, development of exploits that rival it from a complexity and intelligence perspective being used by mainstream cybercriminals. So yes, but
I think you have to accept it's always going to get better. As cool as Stuxnet was, in 10 years we're going to go, remember that old thing? Yeah. PLCs, whatever.
Yeah.
But to add actually what you're saying, I think you absolutely hit on what we're really seeing is the commercialization has a huge effect. If I would take this in the future, and something I've been envisioning is that we talk about nation states and people trying to attack. I think we eventually have to get to the point where this is so commercialized, you have to worry about your neighbor, your boss, your kids. Essentially having the skills and the ability to start targeting you or
someone you had a disagreement with, or
exactly
you get DDoSed from your neighbor.
To the point where we're not going to be able to, not only are we not going to be able to tell where it came from, it's going to be completely irrelevant because there'll be literally so many targeted attacks. We'll have to stop using the term targeted and say, well, we're all attacked.
Exactly.
And that's actually happening more and more. I mean, an astonishing portion of that malware you look at, you kind of go, okay, this is a one-off, used on a relatively selective and targeted basis. There's still a lot of opportunistic infection out there, of course, but I think that balance is tipping. One of the really interesting trends in general for me that perhaps is a good segue for the conversation is the whole security of the mainstream Microsoft desktop operating system versus the rest of stuff that we're now using.
Exactly.
And I mean, we've got the mobiles, of course, all that wonderful collection of operating systems, but also all the Internet of Things devices.
Exactly.
And I make the general comment on Microsoft OS, and I'm fascinated to hear what you guys think. I've spent a lot of time sitting down looking at exploitation of Microsoft operating systems over the years. Back in the days of XP, which I appreciate for some people are still present days.
Yeah, for quite a lot of people it's still.
But you could pull off basic exploits. You could do things like stack-based buffer overflows, abusive structured exception handling. I look at Windows 8.1. I mean, the list of mitigations that Microsoft have put in place. Don't tell anyone, but Microsoft actually did a good job. Like null pointer dereferencing protection, low fragmentation heap, effective address space layout randomization. We're talking some serious stuff that means that even though people continue to make rubbish software and make silly mistakes, a tiny fraction of those actually can be turned into useful exploits.
Do you think that would turn into an increase in social hacking? Human hacking?
That's exactly what I think is going to happen.
Maybe it's more difficult to, just spread it out by email so you have someone just
if it's going to take 6-7 months to come up with some weird kernel bug or use after free attack on Windows 8.1 and that comes after as it locks down more, you're not going to burn that in a broad-based campaign. You're going to sell that to a very selective, targeted buyer that has a very particular use for it. And I think for the rest of the cybercrime industry, that means a reversion to more social engineering-based techniques with higher quality. I think we're starting to see the beginning of that wave. The other option is go to all the other devices which are awful. We bought £5,000, good old British pounds, £5,000 of Internet of Things devices and just spent a couple of months hacking them. It's like being in the 90s, man. Like all the stuff that used to work works again. They've opened all the old wounds. It's ridiculous. Are you guys seeing a similar thing?
Yeah, I
kind of agree with the trajectory.
It's interesting. Microsoft and others are putting better protections in.
Yeah.
But how many years from now is it that 8.1 is kind of the widespread version of the OS? So I think the technical hacks on mainstream PCs have a lot of life left in them.
The long tail, right?
Yeah, and I mean, what we're seeing, you're talking about kind of how many, just the scale of attacks nowadays and how they all look alike. I mean, one thing that I like to observe at times is, how does what's happening in info security relate to what's happening in a broader kind of software engineering industry? Mm-hmm. And right, so you look on one side of the world, we talk a lot about startups and entrepreneurship, and we talk about like, people being able to make companies faster, like lean startups and lean hacking, and it's agile. Like, how does that relate to what the cyber criminals are doing? They're using those same techniques, so they're able to kind of build more for less, and they're able to like build, crime packs faster. They're able to kind of do code reuse, and so we see a lot of the things that have made, hot startups like Uber, Airbnb, and all these things, Facebook, Twitter, popular, and be able to grow and scale. We've seen the attackers use those same things, and that a lot of times contributes to why we see kind of the range and highly sophisticated attacks being able to roll out in record time nowadays. So they're using those same techniques that the rest of the startup world is using.
You made a brilliant point there that reminded me of something I saw a couple of weeks ago. I loved your whole code reuse and the velocity that they're getting the stuff through into crime packs. I was looking at this one example a few weeks ago where a patch came out, the patch fixing an undisclosed vulnerability. Someone had responsibly disclosed it, I guess. And within a couple of hours, this thing had been reverse engineered and an exploit implemented and distributed as an update in crime packs. Well, that puts a lot of security companies to shame in velocity. That's impressive, like feats of engineering and use of modern technology. And I think you're absolutely right that business agility, as well as use of all those new technologies, has afforded cybercriminals some great opportunities.
Keep in mind too, from a cyber criminal perspective, it's in their best interest to work together as quickly and efficiently as possible. Whereas from a security industry perspective, with all due respect, we're technically competitors. If we're not, if we don't figure out a way to get more open and sharing and go, look, hey, all business aside, we need to figure this out. If we don't get to that mode, they will easily overtake us.
Since I have vendors here, as the only non-vendor, in terms of well, I want to talk about Microsoft first, so you can just all relax. So you have XP. So the keynote speaker from Black Hat, he started by talking about how if you abandon your car somewhere, abandon your house, somebody's going to take it away and do something with it. Somebody else will own it, maybe tear it down. So you leave XP like, okay, so fine, this is not ours anymore. So it still says Microsoft. We're not going to do anything with it. What could you do, like from a vendor's perspective? Should there be any sort of regulations or policies for accountability? If you make something, then and you make money off it, should you have a responsibility to?
It's an excellent question.
Maybe a difficult question. I don't have an answer to it.
It is difficult. I mean, we're venturing there into the whole region of software liability, which has been a very hot topic in the legal space of late. I'm a proponent of software liability in certain contexts. I think there are cases where a failure to act and do the right fundamental security practices can almost be as clear as negligence. But I think it's very difficult in this scenario here because Microsoft are to a point where architecturally they have to move on for many reasons. Commercially continuing to support that product becomes a very painful thing. And in all fairness, there are several architectural flaws with Windows XP that they can't fix. This is an old operating system.
Exactly.
And I do wonder if even if they tried to continue, if they would actually potentially be negligent for trying to continue, given the state of it. It's like allowing someone to continue driving around with fairly dysfunctional brakes that in the 90s were okay, but you're like, I'm going to keep fixing them, even though they're not really up to standard today. So I think there is a line. I don't think Microsoft has really played it that badly in this case. I think they've waited quite a long time.
There's only so much you can do.
Yeah, I think they've been pretty reasonable. I understand that there are commercial motivations for that shift as well.
Yep.
Right?
I mean, so if you look at, you bring the analogy up of a vehicle, like an old vehicle with old brakes out there. So there's a question, like that old vehicle on the road that's unsafe right now, is it the vehicle manufacturer's responsibility to keep that unsafe vehicle off the road? Or is there some government intervention that keeps you from driving unsafe vehicles? In most countries and states, you have to have a car inspection. You have to have a vehicle. So before you can get on the highway, you have to make sure your car is safe. So I mean, if you take that same analogy to the internet, it wouldn't necessarily be Microsoft's responsibility. Your service provider, someone would make sure your computer's clean and safe before it connects to the internet and starts to interact with other computers on the internet. So I think there's absolutely some opportunity there, right? That if you're running an old PC with faulty software, should you be allowed to connect on the same LAN and connectivity as your neighbors and start to interact with them? That becomes a problem. It's okay if you have this old raggedy car and you leave it in your driveway or your shed. It's like when you bring it out on the road and you start making it dangerous for other people, that's when someone should stop you from doing that.
But I think something like that is starting to happen. I don't know if it'll come to fruition, but in the form of a kill switch. I.e., if there was a kill switch in XP that just wiped out everybody's XP OS at a certain date, how long till we get to the future where it's like you bought 8.1 and by the way, by 2020, this OS is dead. Yeah. Literally, it was set to expire. I think it's the only way you could actually enforce something like that. But when I hear about kill switches and these phones and stuff, I'm thinking, well, there's the genesis of exactly what you're describing here.
You also think, though, a lot of these operating systems now are getting in the direction of you're going to update. You don't have a choice. And there's also, I think, a bit of a social change where generally people are a lot more quick to go and update things like their mobiles. Like, ooh, updates, apply them.
Well, they want updates because you get the feature. Like, no, don't touch the computer, but update, sure. Oh, my Android, of course, I want that, new functionality, or you need it because your Snapchat or Twitter or whatever just says, you need the latest version.
Yeah.
Right. So let's imagine that you have this old PC that's running kind of unsupported OS, right? So I don't know, as a community, should we spend our time trying to convince you to catch up with the rest of the world? And I would just love to know when you try to interact with my website or my PC, just know that you're driving an unsafe vehicle or computer and not allow you to interact with me. Right, so what if that concept was, okay, you have your unsafe PC, I can't convince you to come up to the modern ages, right? You like Internet Explorer 3.1 for some reason. So fine, you can't do transactions on my website. You can't kind of connect to my VPN. I mean, that is one way to kind of really fence off these unsafe computing devices that are floating around. If not, I don't know how to convince my grandmother kind of why she needs Windows 8.1. Right?
Just break her computer and
just borrow
exploit it and use it to update it. Right? The payload should be the update. I do think there is something, however, in that software liability topic where it may not be so apt in this particular case to say that Microsoft has done it wrong. I think in the case of other vendors, we have seen certain vendors be very irresponsible with security practices. They have directly contributed to breaches. Not in the there's no 100% insecurity, you were unlucky sense, but in the you knew there was a problem and you couldn't be bothered to fix it after 180 days after someone told you about it. And I think that we do potentially need some laws to help assist that.
But how much is that is being driven by these same users who complain about their exploits are going, why isn't my update ready? Where's my new version of this? What I want this, I want this, I want this.
It's the pressure of time.
Exactly. You don't come to market, I'm going to buy something else. So we put this kind of pressure on them at the same time. I mean, again,
there's a balance.
Don't get me wrong. Some companies done some bad stuff.
But look at the car market, right? I want the car with the latest features, but at the same time, they cannot sell me a car that is unsafe. There's a whole set of measures and practices around that we don't have in computer security or in IT generally to kind of prevent them from getting that balance too wrong. There is ultimately the capitalist play out as well. You can't entirely push it to the vendors. This is a multi-pronged approach, but I feel like that's a prong that maybe we're missing a little bit.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, the liability aspect, I mean, here's the thing, right now it's so shifted the other way where it's literally, if you apply the car analogy, hey, if all the wheels fall off, the engine drops, the thing explodes, not our fault.
Yeah.
Nobody would accept that warranty on their car, but that's more or less the warranties they're getting on their software.
Yeah, if it's used normally, there should be some liability. I mean, if it's used normally and it wreaks havoc for some, I don't know what kind of piece of software it would be.
But hang on, as we get into an Internet of Things, that software is now sitting in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like if it's a heart pump for your grandmother and something happens, that's a big issue.
Yeah. And it's going to
That's
be
someone's life.
And if that's driven by time to market, puts pressure on the developers' software.
That's a scary concept.
Yeah.
Well, and the worst expression in the world in security at the moment. Oh, it's fine. It's a black box device. And you're like, so it's running Linux 2622 from the dark ages, is it? Oh, yes, it is. And it's written in Perl, because why wouldn't you write it in Perl?
It's very flexible.
It's very flexible, exactly.
It gives you root access for your convenience.
Exactly. Yeah, we only have one user mode because in fact, we don't even have a 2-ring
Nobody's
architecture.
going to touch that anyway.
It's all kernel mode because why not?
Guys,
but we laugh, but it's true.
Yeah. Just to try to give some, I know it's really hard to try to give some tips, some good communication to our channel partners. What do they say and how do they articulate the IT security message to their end customers? Because where I sit right now, I sometimes feel that the situation is out of control. Everything is out of control, especially now with the Internet of Things. We are slowly but surely losing the grip of things, which is can be good. I mean, as IT security is probably the best place to be now in the IT industry in general. I feel, it's with how fast.
Feels like a
things
sinister
are.
way to keep a job,
Yeah.
though, doesn't it?
and it's another big question to just put it out there. What are companies and enterprises, public companies, what are they to do? This is an ongoing battle. You just have to gear up every morning when you go to work. If you work in IT security, you better gear up because you're going to war today.
Exactly. I think that's a great point.
Yes.
There's
an end to this.
Yeah, it used to be that you had to be kind of this large enterprise or this financial institution or this government to worry about being in war. It used to be you had to be a certain type of company before you had to worry about these attacks.
Yeah,
and as we were saying, you connect, you're in a war zone. All right, so what do you do? And so where we spend a lot of our time is you're in a war zone. So to your point earlier, like the number of legitimate sites that are infected to host malware. So if you're running a website at all, you need to have some layers of protection on. If your users are connecting to the internet at all, you need to connect and secure them at all times. So we see this trend happening where it's no longer about, okay, am I this type of company? Do I need this, and this? It's, okay, I'm connected to the internet. I realize there's a cost of doing business. I have to protect all my sites and all my users at all times. And so that's a lot of the initiatives that we're seeing happening right now is people take exactly that mindset of, it's dangerous as soon as I connect. And so what do I need to do to kind of realize that there are people out there with unsafe computers that are going to try to connect to me. I need to protect myself from them. And so, that's exactly what we're seeing.
And don't look at security as, if it's one advice to any organization, don't view security as optional. If you get a firewall, don't just get a firewall with stateful.
You just plug it in, it's fine.
Yeah, no, we're online now.
It says firewall.
It's the internet machine.
There's
Just
no
plug
cables.
stuff in. Just use common sense and have security. I mean, have a budget for it. Just accept the fact that this is just a cost of doing business. It's just like how you pay your power bills to get lights, to get power for you have to have a computer. You have to have security.
But the problem, though, there's a mentality issue almost in terms of how we think about it. In what you described there, it's a mentality that says, well, I have this problem, so I'll buy this to solve it. And that comes back to us still fundamentally thinking that this is actually a technology problem and not actually a people problem. That's why we're always going to have jobs. We're not solving technology problems. We're solving people problems. And there's no accounting for what people will do.
Yeah. There's always a new creative thing, isn't there?
Educate your users. I mean,
I was going to say,
if you can have.
But when you're talking to your business, you can't set the stage of we have this problem. I'm going to solve it with this technology. You say, hey, we have a people problem, and I need assistance. It's almost a mentality thing where we keep trying to lump it back to technology and forget the root cause, which wasn't actually the machine.
I think if I had like 3 things that I would be saying if I was going to talk to a CISO tomorrow, as a channel partner going out to talk about security, the three things that I would probably choose, it's always hard to choose in the myriad of different issues. Number one, a surprising number of organizations I go to really have a very, year 2000 security strategy. I've got a bit of endpoint security, I've got some passwords, I do a bit of patching, and that's about it. Oh yeah, I've got some network security, but I ignore the logs because there's too many alerts. And I'll buy more boxes and ignore them because I don't really know what they do. So I see a lot of that. That's not good enough. And if you're in a position where your technology and your processes force you to behave that way, you have the wrong technology or the wrong processes or the wrong people. So, number one, without buying into all of the horrendous hype that is around some solutions, do think a little more broadly about modern protection strategy and don't just do things the way you've always done them. Secondly, I totally agree with the security awareness point. Again, I go to a lot of organizations, big and small, where the security awareness is a policy of 400 pages that is so dull it makes your eyes bleed with boredom. And I love this stuff, or nothing. I mean, just educating people on the basics can have a huge impact, and doing it with the right social tone. So instead of saying, to protect the company, you must do these things, you say, hey, I want to prevent you from being exploited and losing your credit card details and having your family be exploited, your webcam turned on. By the way, this will help the company too. And then lastly, engineer for failure. There is no 100% in security. I'm sure all of us here, honest vendors, would say, we make good stuff, but it doesn't work all the time. It can't. We're reactionaries a lot of the time by definition. So when it goes wrong, be ready for that. Have the processes, have the people, be ready to execute in a failure scenario, because that makes the difference between, oh, that was a near miss, and target. So, I mean, those would be the three things that I would pick out in particular.
It's always hard to get. It's not always hard, but it's. I find it sometimes difficult to get our channel partners to really go out there because they sell a lot of IT. Yeah?
Right.
They sell servers, printers, they consolidate in data centers and whatnot, and to get everybody in the channel to dig into security and get the message and just ask the question. Sometimes I feel it's hard for them. And this is, as I said, a good place to be in IT right now.
It's a multi-billion-dollar market.
I mean, it's a business enabler also for our channel partners. So
everyone needs it, and we have never been at such a point of mainstream visibility.
No, we haven't.
We asked for this several years ago. We were the geeks in the closet that no one would ever listen to.
Now
we have the stage. Let's use it.
What are we going to do?
That's the whole point. That's the whole point, because it's just the last two years it has changed rapidly. Now we are in boardrooms that we would not have access to earlier. We are invited into forums. You see it on just here now watching American news channels. You see it also in Norway. IT security specialists are on the screen almost every day, and they weren't 2 years ago. So things are changing right now.
Got to use that position,
and we got to use that position to get also policy from the highest level to be in. I mean, there needs to be if you have huge data breaches, credit cards are lost. It's almost never the victim that discloses that information. It's always a third party that comes and say, well, this and this company has been hacked, and then it's all over the news, and then you have some newly appointed chief information security officer going, well, it's
but how much of that is a result of, because we have a nasty habit of shaming people. I mean, I hate to pick on you made the Target comment. Honestly, when you look at the depth of that attack, I defy any, particularly retail industry, to have said they could have survived something like that. But by shaming them, they're less inclined to want to tell us the details. Yet the sooner we find out, the better it is for all of us. I'd like to see, is more than education, more of a culture where we stop shaming everybody. Hey, let's accept that it's going to happen to everybody.
Openness,
If you could solve that by regulation, I mean, if they have to by law.
I don't think you couldn't have solved that with regulation.
I think that's tough. I mean, I think regulation
Maybe
plays
it's
a part.
tough.
What we're looking for here is not the mandatory breach disclosure like we have with data protection, where you will be penalized and dragged through a bush backwards if you own up to it. We're looking for the, hey, come on in, it's okay.
Yeah.
Tell
us what happened.
Build the
Yeah.
register.
Yeah.
Let's understand what's happening.
Yeah.
But to create
I
that
still stick
openness.
with the target comment though, from the perspective that the handling was poor. The handling. But I agree. I think most other organisations in the same position would also have failed, and that is a lesson we should learn.
Yes.
It's not the
Probably, yeah,
vilification of
no.
target. It's the let's look at what happened and make sure we wouldn't do the same.
There's so
thing.
much that could be learned from there to make
Yes.
everybody else better.
Yes.
That
And they
we-
shared a lot.
Yeah, and
Actually,
you know,
right.
to their credit, eventually they didn't all come out. But I mean, that's stuff that they should have ran to the market immediately and said, "Guys, look out! Here's what happened. Here's the how they leverage this."
the only
And
way-
don't get me wrong, they made mistakes, but we can't fault everybody for making
No,
mistakes.
and,
Nobody's ever
and
made
like you
perfect.
said, we learn from it. Just like, do you remember URock? All the password,
Yeah.
all the passwords that got
Yeah.
compromised.
Yeah.
It gave us an enormous dictionary of.
It's very
and
useful.
then very useful insight on what kind of passwords people use, and just how simple passwords people use.
I do not use password breach databases for password cracking. Ever.
Not for research, no.
But I think an extension of that, we talked about the education there for a moment. I'd just like to take it a step further because at a high level, when we say that, I think a lot of people perceive it as, oh, well, a lunch and learn someday. But I think the education has to even go lower into the technology where in real time, as somebody does something, the system has to be able to interact, identify them as a person. Hey, Joe, or hey, Sally, if you do this, and educate them in real time so it's now has context of, hey, I was about to send an email I shouldn't have, or I was about to download something on a questionable site. I think people will be more receptive to that kind of education as opposed to, hey, I give you a lunch and learn once a quarter. Are we good?
We've got a lot of lessons to learn in
Yeah,
how
right.
we communicate to non-security people.
Yes.
Exactly.
Both through our technologies, but also as individuals and advocates of the field. And now we have this limelight. We've got to learn fast.
Yeah,
Use it
we-
or lose it.
I think back in the old days, we first released a VPN client. We actually asked the user if they wanted to use encapsulation or, and I'd look at that and go, what were we thinking? As if they'd have any clue. Now, of course, now it just quietly, the system tests in the background the best connectivity method and connects, which of course makes sense, but you're absolutely right, it's security.
You know, what you should have done is have a little thing that's like, choose the protocol number of the type of IPsec you'd like to use.
Oh, we used to ask people like
51
that.
or 50. You're like,
And then
why?
wonder, like, what do you mean? Why didn't you choose that? Like, I don't know what. I look back at it and go, wow, but we took a lot for granted. Like, what do you mean you don't know that? Or,
We're
don't you
learning.
care? And we have to be
Select
smarter about how we.
Diffie-Hellman group.
Don't
Exactly.
ask users questions they don't understand. Exactly. But that doesn't mean
that's-
run to the entire opposite of failing to engage the
Yes.
user. Look at how DLP monstrously failed because people tried to take responsibility from users and put it into a technical system that cannot make decisions, as opposed to building something that helped users do less daft things. I think it's an excellent point, and one that from an engineering perspective,
Yeah, we
should
need to
all
think
have in
better
our
about.
minds. Yeah,
Good guys. I think that sums it up in a good way.
it's been fun. We only mentioned Perl once, not twice.
I still love Pearl.
Without Pearl, yeah.
I've got a Python wrapper for it, just called Perl.
Good. Guys, thank you so much for showing up, and thank you for your good insights and good discussion.
Thank you.
Infinigate TV will be back soon. Thank you.